Hello.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
good, you?
I'm so fucking bored.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. We are all sheltering in place because of this coronavirus that's going around, so we haven't been able to head out and investigate much lately. But on that topic, we are going to have a Ethan on today. Ethan, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
All things considered, staying healthy?
Yep. I haven't left my house in probably 4 days besides to go to the gas station.
So, how is this different from your usual lifestyle?
Normally I would work both my jobs, which one is in the manufacturing sector, which that's running as normal. But my other one is in the funeral industry, which has taken some big changes.
Awesome. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. I mean, this isn't really paranormal per se or cryptid per se, but I think that in this situation that we got going around, it would be interesting to hear from a side of this that you don't get to hear from on the news and stuff very much.
No, we are the forgotten aspect. Like you see all the posts on social media about thanking nurses, doctors, grocery workers. Well, what people always seem to forget is bodies don't just disappear when people die.
Well, if they
There's
do,
a
then you
whole
have new
business
problems.
behind that where we have to come in and clean up.
Right. So, just so that we get this out of the way, we don't want to say which funeral home or anything that you work at for legal standpoint or whatever, just keeping privacy and everything of how it goes. And
I'll just
also,
refer to it as the funeral home.
sounds good. And also, we want to give a little warning to anyone who might be, touchy subject or something for people listening that if certain aspects of the conversation go into a gruesome aspect of the funeral industry or the afterlife and death in general, we want to make sure all the listeners are aware that, what could consist in this conversation. So, I think the first question out there is, so you are one of the people that actually goes out into the field and collects the deceased people.
Yes, I'm part of the removal teams.
Okay. So in this, you hear about the police officers or the medical staff and that, and their precautions that they're taking. What precautions? Because obviously, after a person is deceased, they're still contagious, correct?
Yes, as far as we know and what the CDC has advised us, we're supposed to treat them as still contagious.
Okay. So what is the first precautions that what has changed now in your job from the way you used to collect and remove bodies to the way you do it now?
Well, the first thing that happens is we get what's called the first call, which is the first call a family member or someone from the hospital or hospice calls the funeral home and basically tells us it's time to come pick up this person. And usually we were very considerate and left out a lot of the more medical-based questions, but now the first thing we asked is if they had symptoms of COVID-19. So that way we know to prepare with our PPE and everything like that because it's in limited supply, so we have to be choosy with it.
Mm. Okay, so on before all this took effect, give us an example of like when you go out to well, first of all, you have two, we'll say two generally different situations for picking up a body. First of all, you would have like a hospital sterile situation, like a funeral home or a hospital or something where people have died, right?
Yes.
And then you have we'll call it the non-sterile, like a car crash or someone died at home, or where the body hasn't been properly prepared or cleaned up, right?
Correct.
Right. So Um, in a normal situation before all this started, what would have been the PPE that you would have worn to take care of these?
Pretty much just latex gloves.
Okay, no face masks, nothing like that. Just
No, we carry stuff like that in the van, but it's very rarely used.
okay. So now on in the new situation, how has that changed?
We actually pulled out our red, we call them crash bags, and we double checked all the expiration dates on the face masks, the face shields, the aprons. We made sure everything was up to date, in good repair, which most of it was, but we double checked it just in case, because even like a small rip in an apron or something would be enough for us to throw it out now.
So now you pretty much get a almost full body protection when you go out to these cases.
Yes, we have everything from basically the head down to even shoe covers.
Wow. So, have you had any of these cases now?
No, we have not yet.
Really?
We figure with our market and how we advertise, it's only a matter of time, though.
Mm-hmm. So well, there haven't been that many, again, we're not going to point out where this is taking place, but, there hasn't been too many deaths in Wisconsin. I think as far as, like, Milwaukee's the only place that's really had them, correct?
No, Milwaukee's getting the most right now. In the county we operate in, I don't think there's been any deaths. There may have been one or two, but we didn't get them.
Okay. So then when you bring in the body and stuff, well, I guess this is kind of just all your what do you call it? Your plan of action. So since obviously you haven't had one of these cases then yet, but according to your plan of action, then when you transport the body and everything, is there any kind of sterilization or anything that you would have to do afterwards?
Right now, the plan is for the vehicle that's used, it would be put out of service immediately till it can have a full wipe down. And then we're already split into two teams because we have 5 directors, and me and another person are support staff to the directors. And basically the way it's set up is right now, me and 2 directors are kind of just off right now, except we're running first call a few nights a week. So I haven't even been in the funeral home in a week. While the other team is running everything, and then when we do get one of these cases, whichever team picks it up, they will remain in the funeral home till that body gets its final disposition, whether that's an immediate burial or direct cremation.
So you basically would stay with the body until it's finished?
Yes.
Okay. So that...
and depending on how paperwork goes, that could be a day, a couple days. Because especially considering we use an off-site crematorium, so we also have to organize with them on that too.
Interesting. So let's say today you got called out on a COVID-19 case, and you picked up the body with your partner and took it back to the funeral home. You would be stuck at the funeral home until the body, or with that body, until it was fully processed.
Correct. We could go home and everything like that, but then we also have to do home isolations to where, like, my wife would have to go stay with her sister during this time.
Ah. Well, that's interesting. At least, I mean, like, that shows you the depth of which this is being taken seriously, especially, like, in your industry.
Yes, and even if we have to go down to where it's only one director at a time, we have no plans to shut our door, and we will remain in operation as long as we can. Because the first goal of the funeral industry is, as bad as it sounds, it's not for the families, it's for sanitation of the deceased for public health.
Mm-hmm. So, have you seen any impact other than the the medical and the safety side of this, have you seen any kind of like your supplies being in short supply or anything like that?
Absolutely. We cannot even order most of our items right now.
So do you guys keep a stockpile then? I mean, because if this thing keeps going on, and like you said, you haven't had a case yet, but if this gets worse and worse, and we start seeing more deaths and that, is your funeral home set up to handle that?
When we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, we had enough supplies to last under normal operating procedures for 60 days.
Oh, okay. And again, not to point anything, but yours is one of the bigger, more used funeral homes in our area.
Yes, last year we were over 300 calls, I think just below 400. And already with the way this year is going, we're looking at easily doing over 400 this year.
Yeah, so your 60-day supply is probably pretty sufficient.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Like over in, I think it's Italy and stuff, they had the military caravans and that, where they were just hauling away the bodies to the cremation and stuff. Do you foresee that something like that's going to happen in the U.S.?
I don't think it will get that bad. I actually know a director over in Italy. And what really hurt Italy is the age of their population.
Mm-hmm.
Because their median age was pretty much over 80.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually saw stuff from that director where they had, because Italy still uses coffins, they don't use caskets. But they actually had them lined up in churches because they had nowhere else to put them.
Now, for those of you, for the people out there listening and stuff, Ethan's pretty well connected in the funeral and hearse industry. I mean, that's how we met, was through a hearse car club. So you kind of know your way around funerals and medical and that stuff even before you started working at the funeral home.
Yes, it gave me a great advantage when I finally got into the industry.
Very good. I missed my point. So they actually use the wooden coffin still in Italy?
Yes, a lot of Europe and South America still use the wooden toe pincher style coffins.
Okay. So for those listening, the difference between a coffin and a casket, the one is wood, the typical, Old West Undertaker style with the toe pincher. It looks like a squared off diamond, I guess. Would you say?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the easy way I've kind of explained them is a coffin has 6 sides and a casket has 4.
Right. So the coffin is more of the steel typical style that you would see now. The coffin is like more the Dracula, the wooden ones that are more sized and custom made to fit the shoulder and body and stuff.
Correct.
I just don't want anyone to, the people that aren't as familiar with this stuff. I mean, running a haunted house and, doing the funeral stuff and that. Most people don't know that there's a difference between that, so.
Yep, and that's one thing that'll drive people in the industry mad because the terms are not interchangeable.
Right, yeah. You don't think you can even go to a funeral home and get a coffin anymore, can you?
It would have to be special order, and it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah. Make it yourself. If you want a coffin, make it yourself.
or you order it out of a country that still uses them.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I don't want to get off topic too far here, but I was watching a 4-part documentary on death and the afterlife. It was Josh Gates and Expedition Unknown, and he went to some remote parts of the world and learned about their culture and stuff. And there's I can't remember right now where it was, but there was a culture where the family actually kept the deceased in their house with them, and they would eat with them, and up to, I believe it's like a year, and then after a year they would put the deceased in a what's it called, the thing where you got 4 guys carry it on the corners, and
Oh, I don't know what those are called, but I'm pretty sure that's Southeast Asia somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, they build this. I can't think what it's called. It's got the posts, and then it's got like the what would be like the casket rides on it, and they carry it on a parade through the city, through the other cities at that point, and they take it up, and then I don't remember what they end up doing with it, if that was the one that they burned it. But I mean, it was just interesting that they actually keep their family members in the house for up to a year while that thing is being built, and they treat them as still part of their family and everything. And it's really interesting, being in the U.S. and stuff. Our burial and death rituals are a lot different than anywhere else in the world, and people think that this is how it is. You have a funeral, you put it in a casket, you put it in the ground, and that's where it is. But there's a lot of cultures that have nothing like that.
No, and the way I see it, America has a really unhealthy, or well, I shouldn't say America, but Western civilization has a very unhealthy relationship with death. People are too far removed from it, and they treat it as a scary, dirty thing, when it really should be, a celebration of one's life.
Mm-hmm. And that's the way a lot of the other cultures treat it. I mean, like a funeral isn't it's a way to move on and mourn, but it also should be the celebration of the person's life.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I've noticed doing removals is you meet the people who are more comfortable with it, because we do ask people, do they want to go to a different room? Do they want to watch? And then we've also had some where they offer to help. We had one guy, I wasn't on this removal, but I was told about it, where they were getting the cot ready and everything like that, and the guy tells his son, who was probably anywhere, I think, from like 9 to 12, and he just says, come on, we got to help. It's time to get Grandpa ready to go. And to me, it's like, the child's willing to help. The child's comfortable with it. That's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
He's not treating it as, he's not going to grow up to be afraid of death. He's going to embrace it as, it's another part of life. It's as natural as birth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very good, healthy way to deal with it, is to say that, this has happened, we need to move on, and part of the grieving process is to actually put yourself as a part of it instead of distancing yourself from it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would actually deal with the depression and grief from loss a lot better that way.
Mm-hmm. So now we've kind of circled back to the actual process of the funeral and that. So in the case of not even a deceased that has the illness, but how are things changed at your funeral home dealing with funerals themselves? Because a lot of these older people, well, okay, not if you have an older person that dies, chances are the people that come to their funeral are all going to be older. And
yes,
as we said earlier, this COVID-19 affects the elderly far more, and so you don't want to have an entire room full of elderly in one spot that could possibly spread like wildfire. So how has this affected the way that you're performing the funeral services?
Well, one thing I want to bring up real quick before we move on to that is one of the studies they were doing with how bad Italy is right now is they're actually looking at funerals being the cause of it spreading like it did.
Mm.
Because it's large gatherings of elderly people.
Yeah.
But one thing, especially with how our governor, which I think Wisconsin has done a good job on how they've handled the situation. I think they could have done things a little faster. But we originally got the 50 people or less order, which would only have affected one of our funerals. So we called them and basically explained it to them. Then the next day it dropped down to 10 people or less. So then that basically canceled all of our funerals except for the people who were willing to abide by that rule. We had one family where they would have groups of people, like 6 people would come in. Those 6 would leave. The next 6 would come in. And that worked for some people, but we had a real big high profile one, which the funeral itself easily would have been 500-600 people, easy. And we essentially had to cancel that service down to where it was just a burial with the deceased mother and siblings. And they were obviously very upset, and we had an incident where things got verbal, but we don't hold any ill will against them. It's like, it's hard to deal with, especially with what they went through.
Mm-hmm. It's a rough time. I mean, there's people dying every day that aren't affected by this, and then to say that you can't go to that funeral or anything because of the current state of affairs, and you're basically robbing them of being able to say goodbye or whatnot.
Yep, and a lot of people have been understanding, and there's a lot of people who are upset, and then you get the middle ground where they're upset, but they also understand it's not our fault.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing we're doing to try and help with this and to keep people as happy and comfortable as we can is we're offering, at a later date, celebrations of life free of charge, which that's a couple $1,000s worth of free stuff, basically, because we're offering use of our facility, staff use, everything like that. And the only thing they really have to pay for if they want it is like catering packages. And I think our standard right now we're doing is we're saying like a 3-hour celebration of life free of charge. And then after that, we would have to charge. But most people are taking us up on that offer, and they're like, a lot of them are looking at it as like, okay, well, we'll be in a better state then. We can actually enjoy it, and it'll be more of a party. And it's like, that's a great way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're really going to celebrate their life because you're past your grieving. It's time to get together with your family and friends and look back at all the good times you had, laugh, enjoy yourselves.
Okay, so when you said that you had that high-profile funeral with the 6 people at a time come in there, I assume in between those, did you guys do any kind of sterilizing or anything between the groups then?
Pretty much what we're doing is we, like at register books and everything, we set up 2 cups with clean and used pens, and then one of our staff would clean the pens in between. And another thing we're doing is when you walk in the door, you pretty much have to use hand sanitizer, otherwise you're getting asked to leave. You can either use hand sanitizer or go to the restroom and wash your hands, but it is a requirement. It is non-negotiable.
Cool. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, but I mean, it's really reassuring to think that you guys care so much that you're sanitizing the pens in between use. I mean, that's the epitome of taking it seriously right there, I guess.
Yeah, well, and it's like, you think down to our prep room and, all the normal everyday communicable diseases we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And everything like that. It's just everyone there kind of becomes a little bit of a germaphobe anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then something like this, we just ramp it up to the entire facility instead of just the prep room.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to come back to that a second, but while we're still on the funeral side, if somebody had a body that they wanted to have like an open casket funeral and stuff for, is your location allowing them to store the body until this all passes over? I mean, given the fact that, say, the body isn't infected, so if somebody died now that wasn't contagious or infected, could they have you guys store the body for, say, a month until they could have a funeral?
Our facility doesn't have the room for that, but we do have an agreement with a cold storage facility and a cemetery.
Okay.
And so we can do that, but the biggest thing there is you're probably not going to be able to have an open casket at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll have to be a closed casket, but some people are fine with that. Others, they wanted a closed casket anyway, because some people don't want to be viewed.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as viewing the body itself is not that important, we can definitely set that up.
So, I mean, you and I are kind of familiar with this, but people don't really, well, maybe they do realize that bodies decay that fast, and, you can't, the only reason that, most people delay a burial is because of, permafrost and stuff.
Yep.
with not being
Or
able to
working on
dig.
getting family members from other states and stuff like that.
Hmm. But otherwise, typically a body doesn't stay around very long. It's gonna, from the time that you pass away to the time that you're 6 feet under is a very quick, or tries to be a very quick amount of time, right?
Yes, and pretty much is the second you are deceased, your body starts the decaying process.
Hmm.
And that's accelerated mostly by the flora in your gut.
It starts like eating itself.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And the embalming process can definitely prolong that, especially if you know it's one where you're going to wait because that'll, use the stronger products and everything like that. But just as every person is different with anything, some bodies don't react the greatest to the embalming process and they still start deteriorating right away.
Hmm. Do you find that more in like older people, or is it more of a biological thing?
The ones we notice it the most in are actually autopsies. And I think it's just
Uh,
because of how an autopsy is performed, it does so much damage to the organs and the capillary system and everything like that, that you just can't get the embalming fluid where you need it to go.
Now, I've watched a few TV shows about death and stuff like that. So maybe you can clear up some like common misconceptions or something here. Um, you do not autopsy every body, correct? Unless there's a reason for it.
Correct. I would say in the last 3 months, we've only seen 2 or 3 autopsies come through.
Okay.
And usually those are your suspicious deaths. The ones where they don't have a natural cause right offhand.
Mm-hmm. Like you wouldn't autopsy like a car crash. You know why they died or something, but if somebody, was perfectly healthy and had a heart attack, that would be something that would raise those red flags.
Yes, and that's where the medical examiner would make the call, which where if that needs an autopsy or not.
Okay. All right. I had one other question back to your pickups and stuff. Let's say, for instance, there was a car crash today on the highway, and someone died, and you got a call to go to this. Do you automatically consider that person contagious then?
That's something we haven't discussed, but at this point, we probably would.
Okay, because like obviously you may or may not know who that person is for one, and then second, you don't have the medical history available for them. So
Yes, and I think at this point, we would probably just go ahead and consider them infected and take those precautions.
okay. Hmm. Here's a really weird question, but what would happen to the vehicle?
Usually, I think they just get, if there needs to be any investigation, I know they go to the impound lot. Otherwise, I think they pretty much go to the scrapyard right away.
What if it's, well, okay, again, but this is, weird times. If that person had COVID-19, you have metal now that's exposed and infected. Do you think that that thing would be cleaned, or, what would happen to the vehicle at that point?
I would assume, and this is just thinking of what resources would be available, because at an accident scene, you're going to have a fire truck. I'm assuming they would probably douse it with the high pressure hoses.
You think that would kill it?
Probably not, but it would at least dilute it enough to get it off the metal.
Yeah. This is all speculation. Neither of us work at a junkyard or anything, so, but just interesting to think about. There's so much. This is such a weird time. Like, I mean, there has never been anything to this caliber that has happened, I think, in the U.S. in the history. I mean, you had like the Spanish flu and you had that other stuff, but I mean, it was a different time. You didn't have medical facilities and the testing and the PPE and stuff back then that we have now, and we're still closing stuff down.
Yes, and I think the response to this has been correct. I know a lot of people play it off, but it's like, it has more to do with how contagious it is, how fast spreading it is. And then, yes, the death rate may only be, anywhere from 1% to 3%. But when you already have our medical system loaded up on the normal flu season,
Mm-hmm.
it cripples the system. And that's why we're seeing the shutdowns and everything like that, because if we just let it go, it would cripple the country.
Yeah. Have you seen anything about, like, this being something that if you have it, you get over it, you become immune to that strain, or can you get it more than once?
I've seen it kind of go both ways in some of the stuff I've read, so I really don't know what to believe yet. I think it needs
Mhm.
more study. But it definitely seems like once you have it, you might be pretty good, especially if you're younger. But I think for the more elderly age, a second time around would be a death sentence for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. It seems like the flu. I mean, at least if you get it like in December, you're not going to get it again. Because you pretty much each year is its own strain.
Yep, and that one is so fast evolving. That's why, it's like people like, get the flu shot, don't get the flu shot. It's a gamble. And it's like, well, yeah, because it evolves.
Yep.
But once you get it, your body's antibodies can fight it.
Yeah. One thing I heard, and this is a speculation, not a hard fact, because obviously things are still coming out in that. But there was a doctor on the BBC that said that this could actually be a seasonal virus.
And that's kind of what I've had the feeling towards that too, because with it, it is like influenza. Mm-hmm. So I assume higher temperatures are harder for it to survive, because you don't hear too much coming out of like South America right now and everything like that.
You have it in Africa quite a bit now, more and more.
North Africa or South Africa? Because North Africa would be more temperate right now.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I just know that there are more and more cases. See, I listen to BBC radio. I listen because they're more world news and less biased, but at least in my opinion. And they just said that there was more and more cases in Africa, and they mentioned some countries, but off the top of my head, I don't live in Africa, so I'm not paying as close attention to that information. But I do know that it's spreading there. So.
Okay, and yeah, I would be interested to look at the map of it, because I would assume it would be more North Africa.
Yeah, and you're right. I haven't heard anything come out of South America as far as like Brazil or Argentina or any of that stuff. So.
The most I've seen, they've got a couple cases here and there, but not like the northern part of the world that's getting hit a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
So
but you also don't have a lot of travel.
That's true too.
Yeah, it can't spread as quick.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because it could be one of those things where, when we warm up in a month or two, it might be a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Until next winter, but by that time we should have a better understanding of it and medications available and everything like that.
Mm-hmm, definitely, yeah. One thing I did hear is that cruise ship that had been denied port, and when they did finally port and get put into quarantine, when they went in to clean it, it had been, I want to say, 18 days, and the virus was still alive on the ship. Did you see that?
I didn't, but considering that type of environment, it's like, it's not technically moist, but there's still plenty of water around. I could see how it could sustain itself in that environment.
But it's supposed to only be able to survive for like 3 days on metal surfaces, so...
Yeah, but you also have the carpet, the bedding, all the wood and porous surfaces that go into the construction. Cruise ships have always been petri dishes. They're disgusting no matter when you go to them.
I've never been on a cruise ship, so I don't know.
I have, and they are, it's like they're usually pretty nice, but deep down they're pretty gross.
Hmm. Well, I suppose anything. I mean, even your car after a while gets, dirty unless you take care of it, because you're just in there all the time and moving around, and it's not something that gets cleaned.
Yeah, it's like my daily car is, it's filth, and that's just because it's full of porous surfaces. I use it every day. It doesn't get cleaned as much as it should.
Mm-hmm.
And on a cruise ship, that times how many ever people you can fit on a cruise ship, disgusting.
Yeah. Sometimes I just love the way that you point stuff out. That's great. You ever been on a cruise ship? Disgusting. People pay millions of dollars to go on these cruises. Here's Ethan. Disgusting.
I'm still going to go on one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if I get sick, I know why.
Yeah. I think I'm alright, like, on the water, but it's when the boat is, like, sitting at the dock that makes me sick.
Yes, that's the worst. Even on, like, regular fishing boats, when you're sitting at the dock, I think it's just because you're so close to land, you feel it so much.
And it's bobbing more. Like when it's moving, you're moving in a straight line like a car, but the boat is... I've only been on, I think, I'll say 3 boats that I can remember, and they weren't ever pleasant experiences for me, so...
No, that's like... I grew up, my dad had a bass fishing boat, so we were out all the time, and it's always by the dock is just worse, but when you're like out in the middle of the lake or whatever, it's like, oh, this is fine.
Alright, so since we're on this whole coronavirus thing, and we are Cryptids, Anomalies, in the Paranormal Society, a lot of the stuff we deal with is, conspiracy and stuff like that, and thoughts and that. So, have you looked into any of the stuff revolving around this?
I normally listen to my 2 favorite talk radio shows at night. I won't mention them by name.
Okay.
But as soon as this has all started, they have just been dumpster fires broadcasted nationwide, basically.
Yeah.
To where some of the stuff is, okay, they're thinking logically, and then at the next sentence, it's like, okay, you guys just did an 8-ball and then got on the air.
Yeah. So I think here's the easy side of this is you go on Facebook now, and everybody's group, Democrats, Republicans, animal welfare, human welfare, this group, the gun group, every group claims that a different cause for this.
Yes.
And it all fits with their agenda. And so basically I take all that and I throw it away. Because all these guys just want to make, it's Trump's fault, Okay, so that's, those guys are complaining about that. The gun Nazis say that, this is just a ploy to take away the guns and our rights and stuff. And then you got the anti-government people saying, look how quickly they've, shut down the entire country, they're going to remember this. And, you got the animal welfare people are blaming this on, the animal markets over in China because I read one thing that the pangolins were causing this. And somebody ate a pangolian, or this was transmitted via pangolian. And then now everything's about this bat that was purchased and consumed over there, and that's what's caused this. So it just seems like one big, finger-pointing thing that no matter what you say, it's going to be somebody's fault that you think,
Yep, and reality is often disappointing, so it's probably just something simple as, the virus mutated, so now it could contaminate people and everything like that, and it's just, it's probably 100% natural.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you have the other people that say, going back, to old, I don't want to say old, but, older medical textbooks, the coronavirus has been around for a long time. And this is just COVID-19. This is just a specific strain of the coronavirus.
Yep. And for whatever reason, it evolved to be more lethal and communicable.
So do you think that this is any worse than like any of the past stuff, the Spanish flu or Ebola or any of that? I mean, like, what are the death tolls in comparison to all that?
Well, the hard part there is, like, you look at the medical technology differences between those times, then like how connected the worlds were.
Yep.
And in all honesty, it's probably not any worse than any of the others. It's just how we respond to it. And just like all the others, we just have to adapt, overcome, and evolve.
That's a good point. We touched on that earlier with the PPE and, just the way that the world has evolved has made this so much different.
Yep. And I think with the advent of like social media, the way the news operates, fear spreads a lot quicker than it used to. Because even before all this, you would see it with how a lot of the local Facebook pages here relay like the police scanners.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got people that instantly jump on, oh, it's getting worse around here. It's like, no, it's not. You just know about it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's always been like this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that has a lot to do with, everything. Like, even in like the paranormal and stuff like that, people are saying, oh, well, more people are seeing Bigfoot nowadays than before. No, you're just hearing about it more. Because...
Yep. And it's easier to report, too.
Yeah.
More... and since we're on the subject of funeral homes and everything like that,
Yep.
One of my favorite quotes from the Phantasm movies is, "Fear is the killer."
Mm-hmm.
Which, with this situation, that's what it's really panning out to be. Fear is the killer.
Oh, man. I mean, let's take a look at that. The whole toilet paper aspect of this just boggles my mind, because the coronavirus is basically a really bad pneumonia.
Yeah, it's upper respiratory.
Yeah. So why are we hoarding toilet paper?
If like the symptoms said it, cause like uncontrollable diarrhea, I would have no problem with it. That would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go out and buy 6 packages at that point. But it was just, I think what started is you just had 1 or 2 people that panicked or were buying a bunch of everything, and then you just see, people see them doing it, so they start doing it, and it's just this big chain reaction. And now, because the people who didn't panic buy either ran out or ran low, they're panic buying now, which is continuing the process because they're afraid it's going to be a repeating cycle, which it's going to be for a while.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting, though, is with the toilet paper, when people were buying it, that's what they were buying. You could go to the store and buy food in abundance. You just couldn't find toilet paper. And that's...
And it made no sense, especially, living where we live, because all the companies that make toilet paper are here.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're the first ones to get resupplied, so what are you worried about?
Yeah, and if you're so worried about, okay, so now we're at the point where things are starting to close. And you're worried about the food, or you're worried about things closing, so now you need to have that 2-week supply. But when this started... I could see having, a 2-week supply of food and toilet paper. But they didn't do that. They went out and bought toilet paper, not food.
Yep.
And wouldn't you think that you would stock up on, your bottled water, your non-perishable food, and your, I guess, toilet paper? I've never seen toilet paper as such a necessity, but you don't need it to survive.
Yeah, and I've never understood that, because it's like, okay, well, if you're stuck at home, let's face the facts. You've got a shower. Worst case scenario, you've got a hose. There's ways around this.
Or you've stockpiled the bottled water because you need it to survive, and you can wash yourself that way.
Yes. And that was a big thing that affected me and my wife, because we work separate shifts. We aren't together a whole lot. So for us to have groceries in the house is not something, we did a lot. Right. It was normally we would, in the hour we'd see each other for the day, we'd run and get fast food, or when we were together, we just eat out. Mm-hmm. So for us, it was a necessity for us to go to the grocery store because otherwise we didn't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we did it, a lot of things were sold out. And instead of getting upset, it's like, okay, well, let's just buy what's left because this way we're trying new things.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yep, we went with it at a very positive look.
Mm-hmm.
But then we were also smart. It's like, okay, well, let's not buy anything perishable because if we don't eat it, it just goes bad. So let's buy frozen stuff in cans,
mm-hmm.
Stuff that isn't going to go bad. Which when you looked at the shelves, all the perishables were gone. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense because if you bought, let's say 22 carrots, how many of those can you really eat before they go bad?
Yeah. And the cartfuls of meat.
Yeah, which granted, meat you can freeze, but even then it's like, how do you have the room for that in your freezer?
Well, if you're a hunter, you have a chest freezer.
Yep, but even then, that should be filled with game meat anyways.
Unless you're a bad hunter.
A good hunter.
So, about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I started buying, not like prepper supplies, but I have like the rations and stuff like that. And I have a couple cases of bottled water and stuff. So it didn't really bother me too much that, if I'm pretty much set for a couple months.
Yep.
But the thing that I find funny is we're doing that big overnight investigation thing coming up here. And I bought a bunch of non-perishable canned goods and stuff to take for that. So I didn't need to bring a cooler. So I have a couple cases of food there from that too. So I'm pretty ready to go.
Yep. And even then, when we did go grocery shopping, we really didn't buy that much.
Mm-hmm.
We only spent like $200, which in terms of contemporary grocery shopping, that's not that much.
No, everything that I wanted was still there. I got my Mountain Dew and I got my double stuffed Oreos.
Yep, that's actually one of the things we bought was like Chips Ahoy cookies and Oreos because it's like, okay, we're going to be bored, so we're going to want to snack on stuff, so let's buy that. And just like chicken tenders, stuff like that, or like the bag meals where it's noodles and chicken Florentine or whatever. It's like stuff that made sense.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I found interesting is right when this all started happening, I took a venture out to, Walmart and Target and checked kind of stuff out. And I found it surprising that this is a virus and gets you sick, yet the aisles of cold medicine and, like medical supplies, fully stocked.
Yep, it makes no sense. The only ones that aren't stocked are the ones that are having supply chain issues.
Yeah. And now, granted, now it's more sold out, but I mean, this was at the peak of the toilet paper pandemic right there.
Yeah, where it's like, why wouldn't you be buying cough drops, NyQuil, Dayquil?
Yep.
Symptom suppressants, because that's what they are. They don't treat anything. They just suppress your symptoms.
Yep. And maybe that's just it. I mean, it's if you don't have it, you don't have the symptoms, you don't know what you need, I guess. I don't know. But
and then another thing, and this drives me nuts because in the medical fields, the funeral industry, you're taught cross-contamination with stuff like latex gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier today, I went and put gas in my car. And there's a guy driving with gloves on, doing all this normal everyday stuff with gloves on. And it's like, well, you realized if your gloves were contaminated, you just touched everything. Mm-hmm. So the second you touch it again, it'll be on your hands. It's like the proper way to avoid cross-contamination is you do what you have to, you don't touch anything else, and then you remove your gloves inside out and dispose of them.
Correct, yep.
Just keeping them on all the time does nothing except spread. It's basically like taking a raw piece of chicken and throwing it around your house.
I want to touch on something else here. Your wife works at a gas station.
Correct.
And one of the latest researchers or whatever this said that the gas station pumps are one of the highest transmitters of this disease right now. Because everyone that is still out and about, every person that drives, being that public transportation is pretty much shut down now because of this, has to go out and touch the handles of these gas pumps. So, and I mean, you don't work there obviously, but do you know, what precautions they're taking?
Most of the precautions they've taken have been in-store type things.
Mm-hmm.
But like right now, I ride around with a thing of Lysol wipes in my car just because I trust nothing.
Mm.
But even that I didn't think of. But now that you mention it, yeah, the next time I go put gas in, I'm going to wipe that handle down with a wipe before I, put gas in my car.
Yeah. I've gotten gas once since this whole thing started, and there's the hand sanitizer next to the pump when I was done, and I went to use it and it was empty. But as soon as I went in, the gas station had automatic doors, and I went in and I went straight to the bathroom and I washed. So, but I mean, I'm not afraid of getting it, but I'm also not stupid. So
yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at because, respiratory wise, I am a smoker, so I have that working against me. But overall health, I'm in decent health, so I think even if I did get it, 9 out of 10, I'm probably going to be fine. But I still don't want to deal with it. I don't want to take the risk of infecting someone who isn't in such good health.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't want to carry it to absolutely anyone.
Mm-hmm. Also, like money, like paper money. I mean, a lot of people don't use it right now, but
Nope,
you have.
I have like $100 on me in cash. I won't touch it.
Yeah.
I'm just put it in my desk, and it's like I'll take care of that once this is all over.
You got to think that anybody that is using that right now, I mean, what precautions are they using to, the cash? My mom pointed out, that she goes to Walmart and she pays with cash, and the cashier has latex gloves on, takes the money, makes the change, and gives it back. But that doesn't protect my mom or the money from being contaminated from other people or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even if the cash is just commingling in the drawer with one bill that is contaminated, what is the transfer rate like there?
Mm-hmm. I wonder if they sanitize any of those money drawers.
I would assume they do.
I don't know.
But that's putting a lot of faith in people I don't know.
You haven't heard anything from your wife about it at work?
No, she also hasn't been there too often lately, so she's gotten kind of lucky in that aspect, and she usually works in the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
So she's pretty well removed from the customer base, which to me is nice.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that pretty much covers most of everything from death to life to prevention to conspiracies of the coronavirus at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I think the nation and the world will be stronger when it's all over, and hopefully this means you'll see more and more people wash their hands even after it's over, because nothing irritated me more than going to use the bathroom and then you see people leave without doing anything. It's just why.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see that.
I can hope.
You can hope all you want. I think as soon as this is over, it's going to go back to a free-for-all of stupidity again, though.
Yeah, people will go back to just being gross.
Yep. Alright, guys. Well, thanks for listening to this episode. We hope that you guys learned something about how things are being handled. And, I know, yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear about other aspects that you don't think about. So I hope that you guys found this episode interesting, and we'll get back to more creepy, weird stuff next week on Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society's podcast. And until next time, I'm Barnaby.
I'm Ethan.
And we'll see you next time, guys. Take care. Bye.